Hi, guys, and welcome to our podcast of Wealth Finance for Founders. It's myself, Samuel, your host, and today we are joined by a very, very, very special guest, the one and only John Howard. So, let me give you a quick update about John. Now, John is one of the most accomplished property developers, traders, and investors in the UK today, with 4 decades of experience in the industry. John's proficiency stems from the purchase and sale of over 3,500 houses, apartments, and developments within the UK. With a rental portfolio similar to many investors through his numerous property companies, John's experience is vast, including the traditional houses, hotel, large scheme developments. Having worked in residential and commercial properties for many years, John has formed many valuable partnerships with leading industry contacts, adding breadth and depth to his expertise and his knowledge. John, you are
Hi,
welcome.
thank you very much. That sounds a bit tiring, all that. No, four decades, my God. I'm still doing it, Samuel. I'm still doing it.
Fantastic. Well, it's a reflection of your vast experience, and one of the reasons why we're privileged to have you on our
Thank you for
chat today.
inviting me.
So, I think even though I've said a lot, I'll hand over to you so you can tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, well, I'm obviously John Howard, and I've bought and sold actually probably over 4,000 now. It keeps going up, Samuel. So at the I bought my first property when I was 18 years old. I was very fortunate. My father was a greengrocer. He then decided one day he wanted to be an estate agent in the same town, which is a bit odd because closed his shop on the Friday, opened up as a estate agent on the Monday, and was doing valuations. I don't know what qualifications he had. And of course, with a estate agency, you don't need any qualifications then, 50, 60 years ago, and you don't need them now. So I was fortunate that I got a really good grounding in property from, helping run a very small estate agency that wasn't doing very well. And from the age of about 9 or 10, I'd be holding the tape, because in those days there wasn't any of this solar, measuring stuff. It was all hold the tape one end and go in all sorts of different houses. And so I've really been brought up in the property environment, really, of sorts. Although he was never brave enough, my father, to be a property developer or investor. He would much rather be an agent, and he didn't buy the business till he was 60 years old. So, to be honest with you, it was just like almost a one-man band, which you could do in those days. He used to lock up and go home for lunch. How about that, Samuel? He used to lock the office and walk home for lunch in those days. You can't make it up now, can you? You can't make it up, honestly. So from there, I quickly realised that property. I joined in when I was 17 full time, and I soon realised that actually being an agent was all right, but where the real money was buying and selling property and investing in property. And in those days, you didn't have the competition you've got today, of course. But also you couldn't borrow as much. So you could only really borrow 50% loan to value in those days.
Oh, wow.
And that would be on the purchase price and also the build costs as well, which is all very different now. And that's why things have expanded so much, I think, in the last 10 years. It's all these bridging companies that, we all have to use. We used to use the clearing banks, NatWest and Barclays. Now it's very hard to use those banks. And we're all using bridgers who will lend you the money within a month, but it's, interest rates are high, but they serve a purpose. And what they will do, of course, they will lend all the build costs, which sounds great. So they'll lend up to 70% loan to value and all the build costs. But that's all right if you get the build costs right and the costs right, because they won't stump up any more money. So what it does, it's encourage people who probably shouldn't be developing property to develop property. Because there's always a problem, there's always a challenge, and if you haven't got the spare cash to cover that challenge and that problem as you go along, they may not either. In which case, I look at lots of property these days, and I work with 1 or 2 banks, and I buy a number of part finished developments where unfortunately developers have already gone bust on, and buy them and finish them and sell them, and that's really, over the last few years, what we've really been doing in Scotland, Birmingham, Cardiff, Manchester, all over. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Just going on that point, do the banks have your details there, or do you proactively contact the banks for some of these unfinished developments?
Well, a bit of both, really, Samuel. A bit of both. We have got contacts, and people know we sort of got a bit of a reputation for taking on difficult projects and finishing them. The wine rack in Ipswich, for instance, which was 150 flats. It was called the wine rack because from a distance it looks like you could put wine in it because it's just the shell of the building.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called the wine rack. And we rattled our brains to come up with a new name for the block when we were developing it. 150 flats, 26 million project, funded by the government, Homes England, mostly. They lent us 20 million. And in the end, we thought, you know what, whatever we call it, everyone locally is going to call it the wine rack. So we might as well keep the name. So in the end, we didn't spend any money on fancy PR companies coming up with a new name for it or anything like that. We just went, what are you going to call it? The wine rack. Huh, okay. And that's what we did. And we sold them all off now. So it's all worked out well.
Is that your strategy generally, to do development, send it, sell it off, or at any point do you hold on to it and keep it as part of your portfolio?
Well, I think a lot of people getting into property will go on these education courses and all the rest of property education courses and all the rest of it. And everyone talks about strategy. What is your strategy? What do you want to do? And my view is that you may choose a strategy, but you still need to know broadly about all the other things you can do in property. So when I do my 2-day seminars, it's a comprehensive seminar. So I talk for 2 days about every aspect of property. So residential to commercial, auctions, which is so important, funding, straightforward house building, and straightforward commercial, because you may get a mixed use site you get offered where you need to know how to deal with different aspects of property, not just say an HMO or something like that, which I cover as well, of course. So I think it's really important that you may have one strategy and it may work for you for a while, but quite often people come to me because they want to change strategies. They want to become a property developer, or they want to invest more money, or they've just sold a business and they've got some money to invest. What do I do with it, John? How can you help me invest it? We never invest their money in our projects. We don't do any of that. We're totally independent. We've got our own money. We don't want to have of it. And we get asked, obviously, sometimes, can we invest in your project? And I always say no. But what I will do, I'll help you find your own project and support you through mentorship or whatever. So I think, you may, and also people come to my seminar thinking, well, I want to do one thing, and they come away thinking, well, actually, no, I don't. I want to do something else now. Yeah. So, and I've pivoted over the years, different strategies. Normally when people catch us up a little bit, we then pivot to something else. So when everyone's doing something, some strategy, everyone's at it. Like, say, at the moment, probably a good example of that would have been PD, permissive development, commercial to residential. It's relatively straightforward, or has been, and there was big margins in it. Now everyone knows about it and the margins are much smaller. So on something like that, we've pivoted really away from PD, permissive development, because everyone else is now doing it. So, and we're now on to different strategy. So I think, whatever your strategy is, and there's lots and lots of ways of making money out of property. I've got a friend of mine who buys lock-up garages. I mean, it's bloody boring. But he's boring as well, to be fair. What he does is boring. But and he bangs on about it when you go out for dinner with him. But, he's got 2,500 of them. Wow. 2,500 garages. And now and again, he gets planning on some of them. He ups the rent on a few and, all the rest of it. And he makes good money. So there's lots of different ways of making money out of property, and it's not for me to dictate to anyone which one they use, but it's for me, I believe, to help them do whichever one they want to do.
Fantastic. And so now what we're going to do, we're going to look at some of these strategies that are available. The main focus of today's particular podcast is going to be the strategies that are available, your recommendations, your expertise, and then your view, your honest view.
I will try not to be biased, Samuel. I'll try not to be biased. Because everyone's got their favourites, haven't they? It's like a record or something. Everyone's got their favourites or favourite artist or whatever. I'll try and be neutral as best I can.
Well, in no particular order. Now,
Yeah.
I'm in property myself, and so I'm just gonna take this like we're having an open conversation. So, I've seen somewhere, one of the things I've heard you mention previously is on sales. I mean, not audits. Where you're buying them. I've forgotten the word. You're buying them off the shelf.
Oh, off
auctions. Sorry, what was it?
Yeah,
my mind went.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've heard you say before is that when you go to an auction, don't be pressured to buy. You can have deals afterwards. They are more desperate to sell it than you can imagine.
Yes.
But my experience from auctions, for example, is that once you agree, you've already put down a deposit. They give you 30 days to come up with a full payment. You don't really have much leverage, or you're going to lose your deposit. Am I wrong in saying that?
Yeah, no, well, you're absolutely right, but that's not what you do. Well, you can do that because you might have a really good deal on the day of the auction. You put your hand up, you buy it. Shall I? Let me start off with because auctions we used to, well, until recently we owned Auction House UK. We sold it in 2019. No, 2020. We sold our shares in Auction UK, biggest auction house in the UK. We built it up from 8 sort of franchises to 44. I've been buying and selling the auctions since I was 21 years old. So I love auctions. And the reason I love auctions is this. There's no messing around. So when you buy a property, obviously through solicitors and the normal private treaty, it's called, by private treaty, which is through the estate agent and all the rest of it. It's a pain in the arse. It takes for bloody ever. 3 months later, you're still slogging your way trying to get it exchanged. Well, the great thing about buying at auction is that once that hammer comes down, you have exchange contracts and you complete normally within 28 days. You can maybe negotiate that longer if you have to. So that's the really good thing about auctions, property and auction. Now, I like selling property at auction as well, because the same thing. If you've got a bit of cash flow, you need to keep the money moving. And I was told very early on from 2 very successful property developers, John, always keep your money moving. Always have something, you are selling something, to keep the cash flow coming. Because if you're not careful with property, and it's especially you're developing property, you may not get paid for 2 years.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you've got to live. So the great thing about the people coming into the property industry now is that most of them have been successful in other businesses. And my advice is always keep that business going unless you've got a lot of money and you've sold out, because that takes the pressure off the property deal. Because if you've got to, live while you're doing it all, doing a property up and selling it and so on, that's stressful, and it's stressful for your family and everybody else. So I get people say to me, I've now become a full-time property developer, and I go, congratulations, how many properties are you developing at the moment? And they go, 1. And I go, that's a bit of a problem. I always say, unless you've got 10 properties on the go, really keep your job. And they go, well, I'm going to do a deal finding. I'm going to be a deal finder. I'm going to find deals for people. Yeah, that's fine. But that's a tough gig. I know people train you how to do it these days, and we use deal finders all the time. We pay people 2% finder's fee. In fact, one guy that came on one of my seminars a couple of years ago, got to know him quite well afterwards. Nice man. He's earned £70,000 out of us over the last year or so, but mainly purely on finding us a couple of deals. So it's amazing. So, you can do it, but not everyone. I would say not everyone's good at it, and I think having a 9-to-5 job is a lot easier than doing that. But keep the job and get the property done. So going back to auctions. So buying at auction's great, and anybody who says they can't find a property deal, I always say to them, well, there's 4,000 properties that come up for auction every month in the UK. There's a deal there somewhere. When you get the catalogue, there's a deal in the catalogue. It's up to you to find that deal, and be very, very careful. So my 5 golden rules at buying at auction. See if I can remember them now, Samuel. You put me under pressure. I put myself under pressure when I said there's 5. So one is always view the property. Always view the property. Don't just view the outside. View inside it. Look around it. Make sure there's no cracks in it or anything else like that. 2, go and see the next door neighbour, because the next door neighbour will tell you more about that property than any auctioneer will. They'll know how long it's been empty, who had it, what the problems are, and so on. Go and see the next door neighbour. Don't go when everyone else is there. Wait till everyone's left and then go and speak to the next door neighbour. 3, you must get the legal pack downloaded. It'll be put on the website. Read the legal pack and then get your solicitor. If you're interested, get your solicitor to read it. Very, very, very important. Do not buy a property without looking at the legal pack and understanding what it says. The other issue is what are the others? That's 3. What's the 4th one? Oh yeah, 4th one. Make sure you've got the money to buy it. Now there's specialist lending companies, bridges, that specialise in lending money to people buying at auction. So get in touch with them beforehand, get an in-principle deal off from them, and then you've got a month in which to then complete the purchase. Now, sometimes if you're interested in the property, and I've done this, you can say to the auctioneer, look, if I buy this, I need 6 weeks. Can you ask the vendor now, if I'm the purchaser, they'll give me 6 weeks completion? Because that takes a bit of pressure off. It takes a bit of pressure off. The 5th thing, and more important, just as more important than anything else, is the special conditions of sale. There'll be a special conditions of sale within the legal pack, and that special conditions, read it carefully, because you need to make sure you understand it. It might say that you pay £10,000 towards the auctioneer's costs, or all sorts of things could be in there. So special conditions of sales, they're the 5 things you really need to understand before you buy at auction. Very, very important. Now, after you're, Samuel, with all respect, getting a little bit confused with what I said at some point about being able to pull out after you've agreed the sale, the hammer's come down. You cannot. You are legally bound to buy that property within the 28 days or whatever the completion says. Some say 14 days, some say 6 weeks. You need to check it. But this is where it all changes for the better for the buyer. If that property hasn't sold, okay, then the tables have turned. They've gone from the auctioneer being all cocky and saying that offer's not enough beforehand and all the rest of it, to actually needing to sell it. Because after the auction, and bear in mind, the property is probably been on the open market, not sold a few times due to a bad survey or something. There'll be a problem with that property. You have to find out what that problem is and whether it's a problem you can deal with. And after the auction, you've got a bit more time. You're not under the same pressure. You can renegotiate the length of completion to 2 months, 3 months if you want. Now, when they say to you, we had a bid of 190,000 before the auction on the day of the auction, and you want to bid 170,000, you always bid less after the auction. Always traditionally bid less after the auction because they should have taken it. You say to them, well, you should have taken the offer then, shouldn't you? The fact is, the offer may not have existed, Samuel. It could have been a bid off the wall, off the internet. Now, do you know, on the internet bidding, if you put your hand over the mouse without touching it, but you're over it, the auctioneer knows that you're likely to make a bid. That's how good the technology is. It's magic. I don't know how it works, but it's magic. So you've got to be really careful, really careful. After the auction, the gloves are off, and you can dictate much more so the price, what you pay for it, because what are they going to do with that property? The likelihood is it's going to go back in an auction in 3 months' time at less money, less reserve. So you say to them, look, as long as I complete within the next 3 months, you're better off, because you know you've got a buyer, and you're only going to put it back in at less money anyway. So, hey, take my offer. There you go. I could go on all day about it, but I won't.
The 2 things I've gotten, you need a legal assistant, so someone to read all any small prints.
Definitely.
Contract.
You must look at the legal pack properly, yeah.
Fantastic. And then in terms of the auction itself, ideally wait for the end of the auction and look
Wait,
at
wait to the auctions if you can. I mean, we only look at the moment. We're only looking at deals at auction that haven't sold. We're not even bother looking at the ones that, because we don't want to waste our time rushing around the country looking at stuff that goes for more than we're going to pay. Remember,
absolutely.
the auction market is the trade. It should be the trade market. Just like the car dealers go to a car auction. You know, in the old days, there were only property professionals at these auctions, you know, who've been in the industry a long time. Now it's opened up to everybody, which is great, a bit like the car sales have, car auctions have, but you still need to be bloody careful what you're buying. And but it is the trade market, which is where you need to be. You know, buying on Rightmove, buying a property that's been on Rightmove, are you getting any discount on it? Probably not. It's probably the market value. It's retail price. You're looking for trade prices. You're looking to go to the cash and carry, buy it at cash and carry prices and sell it at retail price, shop price. That's what you're looking to do. Or even if you're going to keep it and rent it out, you still want to know you've got a discount to start with.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you might as well buy them off Rightmove all day long. You know, I can go and buy thousands of, well, if I had the money, thousands of property off Rightmove every day, but it doesn't mean I've got a bargain.
Absolutely. And I think another benefit of what you said is the whole stressful anxiety of having to buy a property live in an auction. I've been in that situation before, and somebody bids, you're wondering, do they know something you don't know? And there's a level of anxiety that goes with it. And it's honestly the strategy that you've just mentioned just now, I think will certainly help to overcome that.
You've got to, whatever you buy at Samuel in property, whatever you buy, you have to de-risk it before you buy it. You have to have, you know, you have to know that you know, even if you're, say, at an auction, you know, you can go and get a bridging loan on a property at auction, but it doesn't mean that the person you end up selling it to, or if you want to refinance it with, a different lender, will legally accept the land registry terms or whatever, you know. So you've got to make sure that the one question I ask my solicitor is this: if there's a legal problem on the title or something like that with it, the question I ask my solicitor is this. I always ask the question to get the answer. And the question is, can we refinance it with a normal bank? Because the bridges will take much more of a view. They're easier to lend off. Can someone else buy this off me and get a mortgage on it? That's the question you need to ask your solicitor. And if they say, John, look, this is a problem, we've got to do this, do that, and I'm not sure we can do it, then don't buy it. If it's a problem you cannot solve, Samuel, do not buy it. And that goes to having a strange next door neighbour that's got, you know, bricks, cars on bricks and everything. If you can't control that situation, don't buy it. If it's a problem you can't solve, do not buy it.
Fantastic. John, how feasible is it for you to go to various locations up and down the country to actually view the property before buying?
Well, you have to get off your arse, don't you, Samuel, and go look at it. Not difficult, is it? Even if you've got a full-time job, it's not difficult. You got weekends off these days, but no one works 7 days a week anymore, do they? Well, some of us do probably, but not many.
Most remote now. Most remote.
So exactly. You can even say you're in the office when you're not. It's fantastic, isn't it? So you've got the great thing about properties. You don't need to be doing it full time. You know, you've got time. You know, what are you going to do if you've got one property and you've done it up? You're waiting for it to be sold. What are you going to do if it's a full-time job? The answer is to keep chasing, looking for other deals for other people and so on. But it's not easy. Keep your job as long as possible.
Excellent. Last question on auctions. Selling at auctions. Now, I've come across a situation where a person was desperate to actually sell a property. They went to an auction. Ooh. Hello, Jim, can you hear me?
Yep, still here. Yep.
Yeah. He went to an auction, wanted to sell his property, and they downgraded the value of the property significantly. Right. Mm-hmm. So assuming market valuation, he wanted to sell it for about 200,000. And when he went to the auction, they said that they would asking price would be, I think, 130.
Yep.
significantly less. In terms of selling properties, how does somebody go around that in auctions?
So the job of the auctioneer is to sell the property at any price, to be honest with you, if the truth is known. Yeah. So they will come up with a guide price at auction. They'll say, well, I think it's worth between 100. Say you think it's worth 200. The auctioneer might say, well, I think we have the guide at between 170 and 200. Now, when they do that, that means the reserve price technically should be between the two.
Yeah.
That's where it should be. But most people tend to ignore that and say, well, I want 200,000 for it on the day or whatever. So the trick to getting a good price at auction is be ballsy and to say, put the guide low, get all the interest you can, because the whole point is you want competition.
Yeah.
You need competition. There's no point having one person that wants to buy it and nobody else. So you need competition. To get competition, to keep people interested in the property, what you need to do is put the guide low and be quite ballsy on the reserve as well, relatively low, so that then it flies at the auction. Now, don't bother looking at the first 5 properties in any auction, because the first 5 properties will be very, very low guide prices and will be very popular lots, because the auctioneer wants to get off to a good start. If the auctioneer doesn't sell the first 5 like that, then he's in trouble.
Wow.
Because then everyone starts getting a bit uneasy. Oh, the market's not so good, da 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 da. So it's different, slightly different now, because it's all online and some of these auctions go on forever. But I mean, when you're in the room, that's when it's more exciting, to be honest with you, for me. But not many are back in the room. All SOPs, I think, are back in the room. I think, when they're residential. 1 or 2 others are, but not everyone. So you've just got to. So when you're selling at auction, you just got to be a little bit ballsy. But that's all about in the buying. The selling is in the buying. If you buy right, in the first place, you can whack it straight in the auction. I've got three golden rules when it comes to buying a deal, and the 3 rules are this: 1, can I buy it and then sell it immediately at a profit? Yeah. Because I should be able to, because I'm buying it at cash and carry price. Yeah. 2, can I buy it, refurbish it, and sell it at a 20% profit? And the third thing is, can I buy it, refurbish it, rent it, refinance it, and get, I used to say all the money out. That's not realistic these days. Get 75% of my cash out to go again. It's all about property's all about refinancing and moving on and getting your cash back to go again and keep what you want, or keep some of what you're buying and move on. And that's what it's about. And what's happened in the last few years, because interest rates have gone up, it's made that very much harder. So I think if you can get 75% of your cash back out again to go to the next deal, that's realistic. Now, if I can't do all 3 things, I won't buy it.
Fantastic.
That's discipline, Samuel. That's discipline. They're the 3 questions you need to ask yourself every time you look to buy.
Absolutely. In fact, that has really helped me. What you've just said has actually just helped me. Those 3 points.
And I'm not even charging you for that advice either.
And even a segue is a good segue to this next question.
Yeah.
You make reference to keep your money moving. Is buy to let dead? Because the reason I say that, buy to let, you sit, you hold on it, you wait 5 years, 20 years, enjoy the cash flow, the yield on the property as well. So is buy to let dead?
When I say buy to let, is bloody boring, isn't it? There's really not much happening, is there? You sit with it, and I mean, I've got a portfolio, and some of which I probably should sell, but I don't, because of the tax I'm going to have to pay and everything else. So lots of things come into it. It's not just sometimes the rental income you've got coming in. It's if I sell it, am I going to pay a lot of tax and all the rest of it? So, in this country, we certainly pay enough tax these days. So my view on buy-to-let at the moment, and there's lots of people around, very fortunate people, who get left money by their family. And for those people, putting 50% of the cash down and borrowing 50% is where you just about have to be to buy a buy-to-let now. The days of putting 20% down and buying a buy-to-let property and it washing its face have gone because interest rates are higher. So, and there are people around. I've got friends of mine who've been left money and they say, what should I do, John? And so I'm going to buy 2 houses with it and for the kids or whatever, I'm going to rent them out. That's fine. But they're not looking to make a living out of property. They're just looking to put their money somewhere safe. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if you look what's happened over 25 years in the property market in the UK, on average, it's gone up 5% a year. Now, there's been dips along the way, but it's gone up 5% a year. So actually, it's been a good investment. But that really depends also on where you are buying. So traditionally, down south, lower yields, but much more capital gain. So prices have gone up more. Up north, higher yields, so more rent for your money, but very much less capital gain, very much less. I got offered 10 terrace houses up in the northeast the other day for 50,000 each. 50,000 each. You couldn't build them for 100,000 each, and the rents on them were £350 a month. Houses, and I said, "Oh, that looks a bit low. Look cheap." I looked into it, and you know what? It's about right. Prices were about right. Rents were about right. Unbelievably, that's crazy, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely crazy. So I take it that buy-to-let certainly is not something that you're doing at the moment.
Well, what we tend to do now that's all about strategy, Samuel. So let me give you an example. Recently, we might buy 10 flats in a block, okay, at a 30% discount to open market value, which is where they need to be for us to buy.
Yeah.
We then might put 5 of them on the market and sell 5 of them, which then reduces what we're paying each for the other 5. So if I do that, I might end up with a 15% return on the ones I keep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we are still doing that. So if you got the opportunity to buy more than one unit, so more than one flat or more than one house together, say a string of houses or a house in 3 flats, 4 flats, you have much more flexibility in what you can do. You might say, well, what I'm going to do is 4 flats here, John. I'm going to sell 2 of them. I'm going to keep 2, refinance those 2, get my cash out and go again. Fantastic. So it depends what you want to achieve. And I get people who say, look, John, I want to be a multimillionaire with the time I'm 30. Can you help me? Or others who say, look, I want to end up with 20 properties by the time I'm 50. Can you help me? Or whatever it might be. So everyone's got different ambitions. Have we got time to tell a very quick story?
Yeah, please. In fact, because of the time we have, I'm going to be doing after this, just be doing quick fire questions to you. So, because I want to value your time as well.
Okay. So I let myself down rather a few years ago. I was at an auction and I was asked to go on a panel before the auction and for questions. And the question was, what motivated you to become a property investor developer? And I said, I was the first to go. And I said, well, I was in my 18, 19 years old. I said, no, I wanted to be a multimillionaire. And it was the 1980s and Mrs. Thatcher was in power and greed was good. That, which I thought was a fairly honest answer. Anyway, next guy next door along was an ex-footballer. He said, well, I played professional football and my ambition was to buy my mother a house, which is what I did. And all the crowd cheered and clapped him. Yeah. The next guy, I'm thinking, this is not going well. I'm looking at a real bastard here. The next guy stands up and says, well, my ambition was when both my parents died and I had a 16-year-old invalid brother, I thought, oh my God, this is just getting worse and worse. And we had nowhere to live. And I got my head in my hands at this point. And I thought the only way I could give him a stable environment to live in and everything else was to start buying and selling property. I thought, oh my God. So I made myself look a right dick, but there we go. But I was just being honest. Anyway, what are the questions, Samuel? What are the questions?
In fact, let me just latch onto what you've just said. Now that you've said that, I know you. Honestly, you're such a humble person.
Thank you.
I would say to you that you have, I read out your credentials before. You have a great running business. You have properties galore. My question is, what motivates you? Now you can actually give the actual answer you could have given back then. So what actually motivates you? I know you do the courses, and I know even the fees and everything else are insignificant to some of the developments you've been doing. So what actually drives you? What is your motivating factor?
Okay, well, here we go. First of all, you show me a property developer that's never lost any money, and I'll show you a liar. Okay. If you're going to do 10 property deals, they're not all going to be successful. You hope that majority or all of them are, of course, but now and again, you're going to lose money. You're going to make a mistake. It may not be your fault, and you have to deal with that. And you learn far more from your mistakes than you do when it all goes right. That's the first thing. So bearing that in mind with what I've got to say next is that, yes, I've had a decent career. I could have done better. I've done pretty well. A few years ago, my business partner, who I worked with for 30 odd years, decided he wanted to retire. And I was at a crossroads, to be honest with you. And I was hearing all about this education, property education. I was just a hard-nosed, property developer, investor, really. And I started hearing, some of the education that people are getting, and they're getting ripped off a bit by certain people and all the rest of it. And so I wrote a book, and that went down quite well, and I got invited to a few different places and so on. I thought, oh, this is quite good. I get to talk at a few places, and I really enjoyed it. And so what motivates me now is the fact that I didn't want to retire, like my partner. I wanted to carry on doing deals, which I do, and I enjoy meeting people at different events. I enjoy helping people. I wanted to monetize it a little bit because time is money and everything else, and I'm busy doing my own project still, so I can't do too much of it. But I do some mentorship. I've got some professional footballers, one or two of those, and I've got other people who have sold their businesses and want some help. I've got other people who I've got a modest amount to invest and want my support. So I'm delighted to help them. I do a few seminars here, not many, because I'm busy again doing my own stuff. But everyone I do a seminar with, we keep in touch, and it's really good. And it's it not only that, but it gives me a boost as well, because the ambitious young women, young men, as well as older people wanting to get involved. And then I do my couple of different property shows, Property Elevator, which I came up with the idea for, which great fun, and I've met some great people. So I've been revitalized, really. And what I do with the income I get from my mentorship and my seminars is I've got an education trust for my one grandchild, but hopefully there'll be a few more. And that goes towards their school fees and so on. So that motivates me to do it. And actually, that's the same thing that my grandparents did for me in 1950. They set up a trust. My grandparents ran a shoe shop, and two boys came into that shoe shop who went to Gresham's school in public school in Norfolk. And my grandfather was so impressed with them, he vowed that he would start a trust and save enough money in that trust with my grandmother in order for what ended up as 3 grandchildren to go to private school, and that's what he did. So I think that's the least I can do.
Fantastic. Excellent. So I'm going to ask quick fire questions, and I just want to get your opinion, your views on it.
Yeah.
We've done a few at the moment: buy to let, auctions, rent to rent. What's your thoughts, your opinions on rent to rent?
Rent to rent's a new terminology, really. Remember, there's nothing new in property. It's all been done before.
Yeah.
Rent to rent is subletting, basically, isn't it? Subletting. So you're renting the building, and then you're going to rent it out for more than you're paying rent for. Nothing wrong with it. Great way to start. But remember, at some point, unless you've got an option to purchase it, which is quite a good idea, because then say you've got an option to purchase it within 5 years at a certain figure, then at least the money you're putting back into that property to keep it in good condition is not wasted. The difficulty is if pure rent to rent and the margin isn't that big, then of course, after say 5 years, you have to hand it back in the same condition that you took it in. So you may have to spend money to put it back in the same condition. So just be careful on that. Nothing wrong with doing it. And it's if you I know a number of people that do rent to rent and do it very successfully, but it's hard work. It's not a case of, oh, well, I've just rented that out and that's it. It's hard work. And you need to keep really on the ball with it. So not a bad strategy at all to start off with. Most people then move on to other things, but you've got to start somewhere.
Absolutely. So I was going to say, in terms of rent to rent, are there any particular margins people should be looking out for in terms of rent to rent?
You really want to make a net of at least 30%, and bear in mind that you've got licenses that you may need to get, fire certificates you may need to get every year, and so on. So be careful with it. Again, ask yourself why you're the lucky one that's been offered the opportunity.
Yeah.
Ask yourself why. Why are you so lucky? It may be that you are lucky, but just check.
Fantastic. Excellent. Next one is serviced accommodations. Now, this is an interesting one. This is something I've done previously. Well,
how did you get on, Samuel?
So, service accommodations, if I'm honest with you, I didn't actually. I was the person who owned the property, right? So, in terms of rent to rent and service accommodation, somebody took it off me. To do as rent to rent, and they did offer it as well as service accommodation.
Yes.
I don't really know what they were doing with it, but I got the property back after 6 months. We had a break after 6 months. It wasn't successful.
Right.
And where this property was in Liverpool.
Yep.
And it was right in between Anfield and Goodison Park, which is Liverpool Football Club and Everton Football Club.
Yep.
With the assumption that people every weekend, you've got loads of Liverpool fans who are not Liverpudlians, they're not Scousers, they travel up from London or every part.
All over, yeah.
So thinking that it would be a good location for someone to stay over the weekend, rent it out.
Yes.
Didn't work out like that. So I think my question now with service accommodation to you, are there particular areas that it works best in, types of people, so on and so forth?
I mean, I don't do any service accommodation, and it's hard work. Again, it's one of those strategies that people think, oh well, I can do it while I'm. That is almost a full-time job, really. I think the service accommodation is tough, and all about occupancy rates and all the rest of it. If that's what gets you out in the mornings, gets you out of bed in the mornings, that's great. Then do it. Do it. If it's what works for you, not a problem at all. I would be wary. Look at the competition. Look how often they're occupied in a certain area before you start jumping in. So look at the competition. See, follow them. See how often they're occupied. Try and work out from that, where you are with it all. Because I think that's that's one of those things that looks very attractive on paper initially, but remember, all that glitters is not gold.
Yeah.
All that glitters is not gold. I've got some holiday lets, and interestingly, we've converted some of our stock to holiday lets, and that's proved bloody hard work as well. And it's all about reviews. And we had a cleaner in one of them who was very, very good, cleaning lady who was very good, and then she retired, and we've had another firm of cleaners in, and they haven't done such a good job, and we've got some bad reviews, which we weren't on it enough. We weren't living and breathing it. And now we've got the bad reviews. We're struggling to get tenants in. We've sacked the cleaners, got some better ones, but the damage is done for a little while, and that's a problem. So I always think certainly with the holiday lets, if you're realistic, and the holiday let companies will give you some bull that they'll get you 3 times the net income you get from a short hold tenant, 3 times the income, which is fantastic. I would work it out on 2 times net income. So if you get 2 times the net income you would on a short hold tenancy, I think you've done very well. 3 times is hugely ambitious, I think.
Fantastic. And the next one is HMOs.
HMOs, my favourite subject, not. So in my day, they were called bedsits, and I used to have quite a few of them. Now they're called HMOs, and they're called luxury HMOs, and Christ knows what, and everything in between, aren't they? And my friend Hayley Andrews, who's on the Property Elevator show with me, she's the queen of HMOs. I mean, she really knows what she's doing, but she's super organised. She does them in a area very local to where she is, and she's very successful at it. And there's others around the country hugely successful at HMOs as well. I think things have changed more recently because cost of energy and everything else has gone up, and of course there's more competition as well in certain areas. Certain areas again, where there's a lack of accommodation, that's where you need to be. And she's really good on stats and everything to work out where she should be investing. I think that's really important. But again, it takes a lot of management, a lot of organisation, and a lot of management. And of course, the profit is in the 2 rooms left every month that you haven't let or something. So you've got to be careful. Got to be careful. But if that's what you enjoy doing, crack on. The one thing I would say is, if you're looking to refinance, which some people are, so they buy a building, buy an empty house, say for 300,000, spend 50,000 on it, say putting it in HMO. They've got all the fire precautions. They then let it and say, well, because a 10% yield means it's worth £500,000, or 10%, 500,000. Now, in the old days, you could get a number of banks probably to value it on an investment basis rather than the bricks and mortar basis. Yeah. But these days, I don't think there are too many banks around that will value it on an investment basis. So they all value it on a bricks and mortar vacant possession basis, which can be quite different. So, if you're looking to get your money out them and go again, you've got to be a little bit careful with those, because not everybody sees it the same way. Yeah.
So you don't think having an HMO adds value to the property?
Well, of course, if you've got to put it back into a house to sell it as a normal house, the answer is not a lot, because you're going to spend money to put it back. Yeah, the trick is to sell it as an ongoing HMO at a 10% yield or something like that, isn't it? Yeah. But when you're talking to these banks about refinancing and so on, ask them on what basis they're doing the valuation. Is it a 90-day forced sale valuation? Is it 180-day forced sale valuation? Is it on a vacant possession basis? Is it on an investment basis? So ask them before you commit to spending a load of money with a lender of how are they going to value the property, because that's hugely important. You need to try with the valuation. You always need to try and control it before you pay your valuation fee. And I mean control it. I mean you need to know on what basis they're going to value it at. You need to take the risk out, as much risk out of it as possible before you commit. Yeah.
Fantastic. And you mentioned 90-day valuation. What was that? Could you explain that to the audience?
Yeah. So the poor old valuer can gets a pretty bad name sometimes off borrowers, and sometimes it's really not their fault at all, because they will be asked by the bank to value on a number of different bases. They might say, right, we want this valued on a 60-day sale price. In other words, what does it need to be valued at to sell within 60 days or within 30 days even? That's tough. That's a hard valuation. So that could bring the price down 20% quite easily. Easily. They might say, well, the valuation is done on a 180-day sell time, which is 180 days, half the year, isn't it? That's no at all. That means that we valued pretty softly. Yeah. So you need to ask these questions. Really important.
Fantastic.
Really important.
Excellent. The next one, flips, property flips.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's really how most of us have built up our capital, really. So to build up capital relatively quickly, then buying and selling is really the answer, unless you're lucky enough to be able to to develop a number of properties and refinance some, sell some, refinance some, and move on and get your cash back. But even then, you're only getting your cash back. You might want to build up your capital, in which case flips are the way to do it. That's all about build costs being under control. It's all about having a realistic timescale in which to do the work. It's all about the amount of interest you're going to be paying and a realistic sale price at the end. So do your homework. When the agent says to you, well, the next door house went for 240,000, you think, oh, that's all right. Check on the land registry. It costs you £6, I think, to see what it really sold for, because it may have been on the market at 240,000, but it may have sold for 220,000, which is the price it's worth. So just check. Don't believe what anybody says to you. Check it out yourself. Ultimately, you are the captain of the ship. Your decisions count.
Absolutely.
Don't be like the captain of the Titanic.
So if I wanted to start up, if I wanted to flip a property, what would be your advice to someone wanting to flip a property? What are the key things that will add the most value to a property? Because one of the things I find when people flip, they've done all the work, prices have gone up one way or the other, they flip and they don't even make anywhere near they were expected to make. So where is the place you can add the most value?
Well, first of all, it's all about discipline. It's all about discipline. It's all about paying the right money to start with. Like we said before, the selling is in the buying. If you buy it right at the right money, you've probably got a number of options. Goes back to my 3 golden rules. My 3 golden rules. If you buy a property, you should be able to sell it straight away, doing nothing to it. Not a huge profit, but at some profit. Otherwise, what's the point of buying it in the first place?
Yeah.
So with builders, if you can do the work yourself, you're on obviously a massive advantage over everyone else. That's the first thing. So it is horses for courses. So if you're a builder or you're really good at DIY, I'm absolutely hopeless. Just ask my wife. She wouldn't want me anywhere near a hammer or screwdriver or anything. But if you are good at that, then you want a massive advantage to someone like me. So it's all about what you can do the work for. So if you've got a builder you're bringing in to do the work, and he says it's going to take 6 months to do, make sure you tell the bank it's going to take 9 months to sell or whatever. So always overestimate, always under promise and over deliver, rather than the other way around. Because if you say to a backer, someone you borrowed money off to do the deal, might be a joint venture, oh, we're going to do it up and we're going to sell it within 6 months. Well, that's pretty ambitious. Tell them a year, and if it sells within 9 months, they'll think you're wonderful. So always under promise and over deliver. And that goes with build costs as well. If the builder says, look, I can do this for 25,000, realistically, I would add another $5,000 onto that for different bits and bobs. And I would, if he says you can do it in 3 months, I'd add another 3 months to it. Because hardly anybody's ever on time and on budget.
Agreed.
So very hard to do.
Agreed. Absolutely. Deal sourcing. So these are more so for people that don't necessarily have the capital to get into property. It's just like when.
Yeah. No,
what's your view on that?
Yeah, I understand that completely. We're all deal sorcerers. I say sorcerers rather than sorcerers, actually, but some are sorcerers, aren't they? I rely on people bringing me deals, and we pay 2% finder's fee. So anyone out there who thinks there's a deal somewhere, we're happy to have a look at it. Get in touch with me, and we'll pay you 2% finder's fee if we buy it. So and I've got friends who I get offered deals that don't suit me because it's not my thing, it's not my strategy at the moment, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it's someone else's I know, so I'll pick up the phone to them and go, hi Laura, I've got this deal. It's not for me. Do you fancy it? I'll send you details, and if she buys it, she'll give me 2% finder's fee. So that's how the world goes round, and it's all about who you know. Property really is a people business. It's all about who you know, and the longer you've been in it, and the more you get yourself around. And these property groups and these property clubs at night and stuff that I speak at sometimes are great because you're meeting like-minded people. They may not do new build, but you might build new build houses. They don't. They find a deal. They sell it to you. they find you what you want sometimes. So that's how the world goes round. And I'm very happy to take 2% finder's fee off someone. Delighted to. And I'm happy to pay the money out to other people as well. So, but to do it as a business, as a strategy, I think you can do that alongside a job. I really worry for people who just rely on that, because that's a tough gig.
Yeah.
It takes a long time for properties to sell. You've got to make sure you get the money, especially at the moment. Things aren't that easy. It's difficult. Yeah. And I would say, yeah, absolutely, get cracking, find some contacts, but keep your job at the same time.
Fantastic. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Commercial to residentials.
Yes.
And this is something that's quite common. We have small scales. We have properties on top of shop fronts.
We do.
And then we have the larger scale as well.
Okay. So people tend to think that PD and commercial to residential is a new thing. Oh, fancy that. We can get a commercial property and convert it to residential. My God, it's been going on for hundreds of years. You've only got to look at these houses that were once, the shops that were once houses to see that, and pubs that were houses originally, then there were pubs, and now they're coming back to houses. This has been going on for hundreds of years. So, like I said before, the property industry is full of so-called property educators coming up with these new ideas, but there's nothing new in property. It's all been done before. So permissive development has been around for many, many, many years. But in 2012, 2013, the government decided they would force local authorities to allow commercial property, mainly offices, to become residential. And the reason for that was because they were frustrated that not enough councils were allowing commercial property to be converted, and there's a housing shortage. So what they did, they took away all the necessary precautions, in a way, that a local authority would normally have, on the planning department normally have. So they said, right, you don't need to change the outside at all. You don't have a minimum square footage inside. You can build as many small flats as you want. You won't have any social housing requirements, which is fantastic, which means that's one of the big things that, over 10 units or 1,000 square meters, 1 in 3 is meant to be a social housing, which is a big problem to developers, big problem. So you won't have that. And you won't need to provide parking. You won't need to do this. So it was cowboy country. It was a free for all. And Nicholas Walwork, who's also on Property Elevator, made a lot of money out of doing micro units, which are units that were very, very small. But people, a lot of young professionals like to live in them and so on. But nicely done, self-contained, and so on. And then in 2018, 20, whenever it was, they then put a minimum size in of 37 square meters, which means they're really one bedrooms. And since then they've changed PD enormously to allow more properties to become under the PD umbrella, a permissive development umbrella. So you can do shops to residential and all sorts of different things. But they've also brought in more restrictions where the local authorities that now understand PD and know how to stop it can try and stop it. So most local authorities are not happy with permissive development and will do their best to stop it if they can. And that's what you've got to remember when you're looking at PD, and the commercial agents say, oh, it's easy, anyone can get PD now. Well, there's a few restrictions, so you need to be careful. Light would be one, parking in certain areas would be another, having enough rubbish bins. I've got a friend of mine who's done a development, trying to do a development, and there aren't enough rubbish bins. He can't put them anywhere because he doesn't own any outside space, so that's a problem. And the other thing you've got to remember, if it's a commercial property, that might be the best use for it still. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So if you're in a very, very commercial area and you want to convert a load of, buildings into residential, who's going to rent them? Who's going to buy them? Will anyone lend you money on them or lend money to the buyers? Because it's very commercial. So you've got to be careful with it. It's not as straightforward and as easy as everyone will make out.
Fantastic. And my last question as well is leased options.
Yes.
Accessing them. How easy is it to even, can you, there's a big field near where I live, right?
Yeah.
Massive field. And I've seen that some of the farmers there beginning to sell off some of the properties, some of their land off for
Yeah.
development. How easy is it to walk up to someone, agree terms now, pay later? How does it work?
Well, there's some people in this country, there's one or two people who are very, very good at this, where you're buying you're agreeing to buy a property, and maybe not land. I mean, land's an easy one, really. Land is where all this started, because with
Yeah.
land options, you take an option on land maybe for 10 years, work at it with the local authority, and then quite often share the profit with the farmer or with the landowner. So, that's pretty common amongst quite big developers. They would do that. They'll take over a site subject to planning or an option on it and work on it for a number of years in order to get planning. That's slightly different to what most people are being taught these days. So what they're being taught these days, and it sounds fantastic, but I've never really managed to do it, but maybe I should have a go at it. And what they do is they say right, go and find a property that's been on the market for a year, 2 years. Go and talk to the vendor, the owner, and say, right, this has been on the market ages. I'll tell you what I do. I'll give you the asking price on an option, and I'll pay for it within 5 years. If the market, so in other words, if the market goes up and there's a margin, they'll buy it. If there isn't, they won't. But what they will do is take over all the responsibility for that property from day one. So they'll take over the mortgage payments and everything else from day one. So that's the advantage to the vendor. Now, that's fine if the vendor, two things. One, if he's got no equity in the property. In other words, say he wants 200,000 for it because he owes 200,000, then actually he might as well let someone else pay the mortgage for him. So that I can understand, but that's very rare. But I can understand that. But I don't understand why anybody within the right mind who perhaps doesn't owe much money on the property would say, yeah, here we are, you can have it for 5 years and pay my mortgage or have it at a rent, modest rent for 5 years. And then the person who's taken out the option is hoping, of course, that the market rises in the next 5 years and they can then sell it straight away and make a profit.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's about. And I know there's, people come up with, say, well, look, I managed to do this, John. I bought it for 200 and 4 years later, I sold it for, 280 or something, which is fantastic. And, I've put 5,000 down as an option, because that's the other thing. Of course, you can pay them. I mean, if someone really has got no equity in a property at all, and you're going to say to them, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 10,000 for the option. That's worth a punt probably, isn't it? On the basis that in 5 years' time, you'd like to think that the market, if it's in a reasonable area, that it's worth a few quid more. So, but that's the only way I can see it ever really works, is if the person selling has got nothing to gain out of it, then maybe they'll take the 10,000 and have you pay the mortgage for them in the meantime, until you decide to buy it or not. But the good thing, of course, is you don't need to buy it at the end of the 5 years if you don't want. It might be a 10-year license option. It might be a 2-year option. But so again, I'm not saying don't do it. If you can do it, I'd love to hear from you, because I quite like that. But I just question how much work it takes to find one. That would be my the challenge, I think. But I would start off looking on Rightmove and saying, right, how many properties have been on the market for over a year? That's where I would start.
Fantastic. John, you have been absolutely fantastic today.
Thank you.
Thank you for your expertise, your insights. If some of our audience want to reach out to you, of course, where can they find you?
If they go to johnhowardproperty.com, they can drop me an email. I try and respond to everybody within 2 hours. There you go.
Wow. Fantastic.
I try to. If I fail and it takes me 4 hours, don't have a go. But I normally do it, manage 2 hours, 3 hours. So ask a busy person, all that they say, don't they? So yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Please, guys, if you're seeing this, try not to buy it from Amazon. Go straight to the website. For any books, especially, just purchase it directly from his website. So again, John, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your insights, and your expertise you've shared with us. And we will speak soon, definitely. And we will be directing a lot of our audience to your seminars and to some of your upcoming programs.
Samuel, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you and speak to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.